Hello, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter, and welcome to the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. I am your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on Sports Illustrated. It's good to be with you today. One day away from game day. One day away. I'm going to be jumping on a plane here shortly and headed to Los Angeles. But I want to talk about the elephant in the room. And yesterday, Antonio Pierce made the announcement that Malcolm Koonce will be out for this game. Not be playing in this game. No other details were given. Obviously, he was injured and in a situation, and we don't know really any more details than that. That is where it is with the Raiders. Janarius Robinson, Tyree Wilson will be the guys expected to step up and to fill in his role. And obviously, you have Max Crosby, who is a 100% guy. You know what you're going to get out of him. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on Malcolm today. Obviously, it's extremely disappointing for the Raiders, but even more disappointing for a young man that last year, once Antonio Pierce took over, really accelerated his career, accelerated his play, had took it into the offseason through OTAs and mini camp and training camp, and just continued to progress. We will get more details on the severity and length. I've certainly heard different things, and we're not going to get into any speculation other than it's a significant injury, and we're going to wait for more. I know that everybody wants more details. I would like more details too, but that's the situation of where it is right now. That is exactly what we know, and that's all we're going to talk about. So, setting aside the loss for the Raiders, certainly it's a significant loss for the young man who's worked very hard. And if faith is something that's a part of your life, I would certainly encourage you to take time to pray for Malcolm. And we'll get more details later as to severity and length and all of that. So moving on now, you have to take a mentality. And I want to make it clear, moving on doesn't mean we're minimizing Malcolm. But we have to move on and continue to look at the team and discuss the team. There is an adage in football called next man up. Brian Billick even wrote a book called Next Man Up. And so when you begin to look at that mentality, I got somebody yesterday who asked me, does this change your prediction of thinking the Raiders will win on Sunday, excuse me. First of all, the game of football is about dealing with injuries. That is just the game. I remember last year when the Raiders won some games and people would say, well, they had people out. Well, that's the game of football. And if you're not going to minimize a win when someone has an injured player, and I don't think you should, then you can't minimize a loss. They still count one. Either as a win or a loss, and football's played with whoever's healthy that day. So as the Raiders move forward, obviously this is a great opportunity for Tyree Wilson and for Janarius Robinson. Let's look at both guys. I want to discuss this with you for a moment. When Tyree Wilson was selected last year in the 2023 draft, the mentality inside the Raiders building, and I was told this, I reported on draft night, was that last year was really going to be a red shirt for Tyree because they did not expect him to be healthy at all last season, and he was not. That's fine. Obviously, he got thrust into playing more because of what happened with Chandler and what happened among the team, because that's the game of football. There are circumstances. He's 100% healthy. He has worked hard. Does he certainly have areas to improve? First of all, he's only a second-year player who has yet to even play a game in his second year. But number one. But secondly, he was literally expected to have a redshirt season last year. They knew he was not going to perform highly, and he was not going to get as much developmental work because of that injury. But the reality is he didn't expect Chandler Jones' situation last year, and he didn't expect, obviously, Malcolm Koonce's situation this year. And the reality rests that he's now in the spotlight, and it's year two. He has to step up his game. Does he need to be playing where Malcolm Koonce was playing last year to end the seaon? No. Malcolm Koonce didn't start the season where he ended it. But the point is, it's very fair to have expectations of Tyree to step up. Now, let's go to Janarius Robinson. J-Rob is a guy that we've talked to you about a lot. Comes to the Raiders last year and did some things well. Was he Malcolm Koonce? He was not. But again, Malcolm Koonce to start the season wasn't Malcolm Koonce that ended the season. Janarius Robinson is in exceptional shape. He is a man in excellent physical condition. He's a man that literally has the physique, the talent, the strength, the speed to play at a very high level in the National Football League. So it's not like the Raiders are there with two players without the ability to play at a high level. Both Tyree and J-Rob are men that are, literally, if you were to write what you want a defensive end to look like, they both are that. Big, strong men. Both men are very talented. But both men, at this point in their career, and they're both young in their second year, both men have significant steps they have to take. Well, this is why the NFL has the mentality of next man up. This is why the NFL has the mentality of somebody has to step up and fulfill a role. Now, who will it be? In the game of football, there are these flashes. There are these moments where a guy gets a chance. You may remember going into training camp this year, I talked to you about Anthony Brown. And I said they liked him. He was not in the race for first or second string quarterback. But I told you he's not going to get as many reps. But at some time in camp, there's going to be a set of reps where Gardner or Aiden aren't going to perform well, and he has to step up and seize the moment. And then hopefully think, okay, maybe I'll get some reps to compete for second string. And each step, you seize the moment and begin to play. He did not, and he's not here. This is those moments for Janarius and the moments for Tyree. Nobody wanted to see Malcolm go down. Terrific young man. Nobody wanted to see any player literally go down. But when you have those opportunities, these are career-defining moments. How many times do you remember, if you've been a football fan for any amount of time, somebody goes down and the next man up seizes an opportunity? Now, we all hope and believe and want Malcolm to come back. And if it's only determined by work ethic, he'll be back. But this is a chance for them to step up and say to the Raiders, here am I. I'm ready to go. This is my chance. It would be the same. We saw what happened with Jimmy Garoppolo. Aiden O'Connell last year steps in. Josh Jacobs goes down. Zamir White steps in and was able to play. This is the reality of the game of football. It is why it is a business. It's why it's handled like a business. And the Raiders have too high of expectations. The Raiders have too much on their plate and too many other good players at other positions to just sit down and say, okay, it's over. It's not. There is not one player that's bigger than the team. So let's now begin to just kind of turn focus ahead and look to tomorrow's game and ask ourselves, what do the Raiders look like? What are the expectations in Los Angeles? First of all, I think the expectations, and they should be this, are a win. The Raiders need a fast start. And we know that Justin Herbert missed a ton of camp because he was dealing with plantar fascia. Okay. Was it precautionary? Mm-hmm. At least that's what we were told. But he missed a lot of camp. And if the Raiders beat them, nobody's going to say, yeah, but Herbert, well, I'm sure there'll be some, but the general consensus isn't, well, Herbert missed a lot of camp. That win doesn't count. They all count. And so you have to learn in football how to deal with adversity. I was told this one time, and I believe it was from Jim Tressel, but it may not have been, but I believe it was from Jim, that football is even more about knowing how to deal with adversity because everyone face it. It's a very physical sport. People get injured in this sport, and you can't be successful in football. You just have to embrace adversity, that it's coming. And so I think the right expectations, number one, Raiders go down and win. This is a game that they should win. Are the Chargers terrible? Of course not. Jim Harbaugh is a very good coach. That franchise is turning and going in a good direction. But the point is, they're turning. The Raiders have already made a turn and know the direction that they're going. This is a game that the Raiders should win. They're going to have the home field advantage. I don't think it's going to be like it has always been there, but they're going to have the home field advantage. And your mentality can't change. Your mentality can't just, well, we lost a player. Well, everybody loses players. And while we're not minimizing what happened to Malcolm, I think we're looking at a Raider perspective. They should go down there and win. Number two, this is a tremendous opportunity for Janarius or Tyree to make a statement. Okay, I've been the first-year guy. I did some things, but nowhere near what I'm expected to do. There is significantly more, and there should be pressure on Tyree, where he was picked, the money that he was paid. And he certainly will feel it. He's a tremendous young man. He knows exactly what this situation is. You could say a lot of things about Tyree Wilson, but you cannot say that he's ignorant. He knows exactly the situation. He knows the expectations on him, and rightfully so. And Janarius Robinson, he wasn't a high draft pick. He isn't paid the buku bucks like a Tyree, but he clearly understands his talent level. He understands what he thinks he can do. I think, there's an old adage, you don't want stress, but pressure's good. The pressure just got ratcheted up on J-Rob and Tyree. Just got really ratcheted up. Now we're going to begin to see those two and their competitive fire. Now, is there a danger of guys in that situation trying to do too much? Absolutely there are. The Raiders don't need them to be Max Crosby. The Raiders don't need J-Rob and Tyree to even be where Malcolm was last year at the end of the year. Would they like him there? Of course they would. But they don't need him there to go get a win. They need them to go play within the parameters of their ability and to get better every rep. That's what the Raiders situation is demanding from them. So number one, I still continue to expect a Raider win. And number two, expecting these two gentlemen, one of them to at least step up and take hold of the moment, or both of them for that matter, to step up and take hold of the moment. There'll be plenty of reps for both. Number three, Patrick Graham is not a good defensive coordinator. He's a terrific defensive coordinator. And so this is where he will begin to continue to write his resume to be a head coach. Now, I've said already, I think he should be. I think he should be right now. But these are situations, as he begins to look at head coaching jobs, that general manager like Schneider at Seattle looked at him last year, looks and says, wow, all right, he loses key players. He knows how to make adjustments. Rob Leonard, the defensive line coach. This is a guy that certainly wants to elevate his performance. This is a guy that would like to be a coordinator, like to be a head coach one day, and think he will be, by the way. This is where Rob Leonard shows Patrick Graham and other teams what he can do in his quest to be a coordinator next. It isn't like the Raiders are void of talent on this team, either in coaching or in playing. Now, maybe they make some adjustments. Maybe they say, listen, we're going to move some guys around. still run our defense, but, put some extra guys over to maybe help on the side where Malcolm would be. You don't know what Patrick Graham's going to do. But the point of the matter is, an injury to any player doesn't give the Raiders the excuse for a loss. Not in situations that they can win. I remind you of last year where Max Crosby, literally his leg is infected, concerns about going septic, could have even potentially been something that was life-threatening or possible if the infection were to spread, that maybe an amputation, you don't know. He wasn't 100%. The Raiders still won football games. Because that's what it is. And there's a danger when there's a massive injury for people to begin to stop and to, overreact. Nobody wanted this injury. Malcolm Koonce is a terrific young man. And he certainly sits in our prayers and in our thoughts. But at the same time, the season isn't over. When this season is over, there'll be no asterisk next to any win or loss for the Raiders that says Malcolm Koonce was out. And this is where now the Raiders, if you want to turn a page in your franchise, now there may be some games down the road where you're like, you know what? If they'd had Koonce or whoever's injured, they may have won that game. That's fair. But this is one of those games where a win or a loss doesn't come with an asterisk. It's do what you do. So now let's switch gears and go to my prediction. I think that the Chargers were planning already to run the football a lot. I think they do a lot of things that the Raiders do. Play action pass. Yeah, they'll take shots downfield, but they want to be a run-heavy team. All right? Legitimate. And so the Raiders now have to say, okay, how do we fill that role? What are some things that we do to make some changes? I think the Raiders will again still be solid at the point of attack. I could see in some obvious running situations, if you don't use a J-Rob or a Tyree, maybe you move Jink out, put Adam Butler in there. So you have really one true DE with 3 defensive tackles. I think that's certainly something I've seen teams do when they've lost a defensive end in obvious rushing situations. I'm not saying they would do that permanently. I think you're obviously going to use J-Rob and Tyree. Excuse me. But those are some things now that they have to do. This is why coaches get paid a lot of money. It's because why do they have injury reports every week in the NFL? Because every week in the NFL, people are injured. So I don't think you let this change a mentality. I think this can be a rallying point for your team. This can be an absolute time where they cohesively come together and say, this is a really bad loss. We love Malcolm. We care about Malcolm. Again, I'm using the voice of the team. We're going to rally around this. Our guys we have are going to step up. Our coaches are going to make adjustments. But in the end, I expect the Raiders to go down and get the win in Los Angeles. I don't expect it to be a pretty win because I don't think in the National Football League you get a lot of those. These are tight games. I was told the other day, and it's not a Hondo original. I don't remember who told me, but I may have even heard it on NFL Network, but it's not a Hondo original, that just over 75% of the games in the National Football League are within one score. I don't think you expect a lot of blowouts in this league. But the Raiders have a terrific punter and kicker, the best combination in the NFL, in my opinion. They've got a defense that already has a chip on their shoulder. The loss of Malcolm, I think, makes the chip bigger. And quite frankly, they have an offense with something to prove. And this is the game where they go out and say, the emotional last year was not just emotion, it was reality. The team, the motto of the franchise, just win, baby. Just win. And so When somebody goes down, we have to pick it up. I mean, you've seen it throughout the NFL. You've seen it throughout college football. And now's that time. I don't think there's any time for changing of expectations. I don't think there's any time for anything other than eyes forward, straight ahead. This is the advantage of having a head coach like Antonio Pierce. When pressure comes, he doesn't lose focus. Straight ahead, focused right ahead. Thought process right ahead. And that's where the Raiders have to be now. Just laser focused in. Does this hurt them in margin of mistakes that they can make? Of course. Of course. Does this require them to play even more attention to detail? Absolutely. But the sky is not fallen. You're just realizing that you're dealing with a very disappointing season. But there are 17 games left. The first one has not even been played. And the Raiders' mentality, next man up. We're going to learn a lot about this Raider team. We're going to learn about their mental toughness. If Jay Billis wrote a book on toughness. If you've not read it, I really encourage you to read it. But this is where we're going to find out about the depth of the Raiders. This is where, remember, we talked about all offseason about the guys gathering and working. This is why you do those moments right here, right now. That is why you're up early when everyone else is in Cabo and everybody else is in Vail and everybody else is on the beach in Miami. And you get up and you go to the facility and you grind. It's for these moments right here. I'm not lowering my expectations for the Raiders one bit. Had a lot of people ask me if I was. Not one bit. The Raiders are not built by one team. By one player. Key player, very important player, very good player, very good guy. But we didn't change our expectations when Max wasn't at 100% last year. And I realized he was still playing. And Malcolm won't be on Sunday. But it's the same principle. Next man up. That's the mentality. It's time for the Raiders now to go down and get a win. It's time to make a statement. This would be a massive statement. To go down and say, yep, we hit adversity. Yep, tough loss. But yep, we do our thing. And your thing, when you're a Raider, is very simple. Your thing, when you're a Raider, is just one mentality. You know what that mentality is? Just win, baby. Malcolm is certainly in our thoughts and prayers. Wonderful, wonderful young man. But now the season begins in earnest, and expectations don't change.